Yibane, we will build it. Olam chesed Yibane. We will build this world from love. Yibane, we will build it.
Good morning and welcome to today's Elul Soul Brew, curated voices from around the world, bringing you on a journey through inspiration and introspection leading up to the high holidays. I'm Rabbi Bluth, host and producer of the Soul Brews at the Beth Tzedek Center for Spiritual Wellbeing. Today we've got with us Rabbi Elhanan Miller. Rabbi Elhanan is currently a pulpit rabbi in Canberra, Australia, and he received his smicha in my cohort from Beit Midrash Har El in Jerusalem. Elhanan was formerly an Arab affairs reporter for the Times of Israel, a freelance journalist for many publications in the US and in Australia, and is regularly featured when he comments on Israeli politics for Al Jazeera, BBC, Sky News Arabia. He's also appeared in the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal. And Elhanan has been working on an incredible project which bridges Judaism and the Arab world, which I hope we will hear a little bit about in his Soul Brew today. So, Elhanan, I hope you're well in Australia. And it's really, really a pleasure to have you join our community here and to hear from you. So leading up to the high holidays, what's your soul brewing?
Good morning, everyone. My name is Elhanan Miller. And as we approach the high holidays, my soul is brewing around a piyut that we sing or that we recite on Rosh Hashanah and on Yom Kippur, Unetane Tokef. It's a very famous piyut where we say, V'chol ba'ei olam ya'avrun lefanecha kivnei maron. And all the inhabitants of the world will come before you, God, as sheep. My name is Rabbi Elhanan Miller. I'm the rabbi of the community here in Canberra, the capital of Australia. But I am from Israel, from Jerusalem. As a student, I was engaged in interreligious dialogue for many years, with Muslims primarily. My background is in Arabic and in Islamic studies. And this this search to connect to other religions has brought me 3 years ago to establish an online project that I named People of the Book, or Ahl al-Kitab in Arabic, which is an attempt to educate Muslims and specifically Arabs on Jews and Judaism. The project began with a series of videos that I produced, animated cartoons, explaining Jewish faith to non-Jews. We spoke about kosher food, clothing, fast, the high holidays, ritual. The second step of my project was a series of in-depth film dialogues with a Muslim counterpart, an Israeli Arab woman called Thana Jawabra, where we delved into these issues in more depth. The question of where is our place in the world and how do we as Jews view members of other faiths is something that we don't always think about, but really comes into focus on Rosh Hashanah, where we believe that the whole world is judged, not just the Jewish people. And the idea of where do we fit into this cosmos? Where do we fit into this tapestry of world faiths, and specifically faiths that we think of as monotheistic or Abrahamic, as they're sometimes called, is something that's been on my mind for a long time. So I'd like to share with you some of the thoughts that I've had or some of the conclusions that I reached in my past few years of dialoguing with Muslims and trying to reach out to them. First, I think I learned sensitivity to other cultures and what it means to be sensitive both to your faiths, but also to others. One example was when I produced some of these cartoons, I realized that some of the things that I did could come across as offensive. For example, in one of the cartoons, my animators drew the prophets, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, when we tried to explain the foundation of the 3 daily prayers in Judaism. And I've adapted and changed my cartoons to cater to those sensitivities. For example, we stopped drawing cartoons of prophets with their faces. I think I also learned humility, because every faith and every religion claims to have a monopoly over the absolute truth. And I came across believers of other faiths that were extremely convinced that their faith is the one. So this dialogue kind of put into perspective what it means to have humility and see how we've influenced one another through our faith journeys and through our practice. I think another really interesting conclusion was to see how Judaism, and specifically the Torah, has inspired both Christianity but also Islam. And one of the stories I wanted to share with you today is the story of the Akedah, the sacrifice of Abraham. And now, in the Torah, Abraham sacrificed his son Isaac, or was about to sacrifice his son Isaac, until he was stopped by an angel of God, which substituted Isaac with a ram. And this dramatic, seminal story is something that we read on the second day of Rosh Hashanah as a, paradigm of self-sacrifice. Just a few days ago, the Muslim world celebrated Eid al-Adha, the festival of the sacrifice, also known as Eid al-Kabir, the big festival, one of two main holidays in the Islamic calendar. And that holiday too deals with the sacrifice. In the Quran, the son's name isn't mentioned, but according to Islamic faith or interpretation, most Muslims believe that it was Ishmael, Abraham's eldest son, who was sacrificed. And a few days ago, I produced a video discussing the similarities between the sacrifice narratives in Judaism and Islam. And I brought a midrash that Rashi quotes when talking about the Akedah, the sacrifice. And the midrash says that Abraham had a dialogue with God. When God said to him, Kachna et bincha et yechidcha asher ahavta et Yitzchak. When God speaks to Abraham, Abraham asks God, what do you mean et bincha et yechidcha? What do you mean your only son? Ze yachid leimo, v'ze yachid leimo. Both Isaac and Ishmael are only sons to their mothers, Hagar and Sarah. Asher ahavta, whom you loved. Abraham says to God, I love both my sons equally. How can you separate the love of a father to either of his sons? Finally, God says to him, Et Yitzchak, take Yitzchak. He specifies Isaac's name. So I use this midrash to tell my viewers that I don't really believe that in God's eyes there is one son who is more beloved than another. And I think that's what the midrash says. We both share from this ocean of faith, devotion, love. That's the main motivator, I think, in our religions. And it's really beautiful to see how the story of the Akedah inspires values that are common both to us and to Muslims. And I think that the values that we can take from that story are the value of self-sacrifice, which I think is always part and parcel of any religion. I don't think there is a religion without self-sacrifice. Of course, God forbid not sacrifice of our sons or our children. But every religion, in order to be true and genuine, has to have an element of sacrifice. And every person can define what that sacrifice is. And the second issue is really submission to God. At some point, not in a total way, we have to put some of our inclinations, some of our wishes aside and obey. So these are some of the ideas that I feel I gleaned from my dialogue with Muslims, and I wanted to share with you today as we approach the high holidays. My name is Elhanan Miller. I'm a rabbi here in Australia, in Canberra, and I wish you all a very good Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and holiday season.
We will build this world from love.